Okay, so you've sent in a bunch of stuff on hybrid work models.
Yeah.
And honestly, I
Mhm.
mean, trying to make sense of it all can feel kind of overwhelming, right?
Oh, for sure.
So what we want to do today
Right.
is like cut through all that noise and figure out like what really matters
Yeah.
when it comes to whether or not like hybrid actually works,
Of
Yeah, get to the
course.
core of it.
Yeah, we're not just going to like rehash the whole best of both worlds thing.
Right, exactly.
We want to dig into what it really takes to actually make hybrid work,
hmm
actually effective.
And not just like splitting your time
Right.
between the office and home, right?
No, it's like you said, going deeper than that.
Yeah.
Rethinking how we work all together.
Yeah, because I mean, on the surface, hybrid sounds amazing.
Of course,
So,
all the flexibility, no commute.
yeah, who wouldn't want that?
Exactly.
But one of the things that kept coming up in what you sent
Yeah.
was this worry about
hmm
like a productivity nightmare. So it's this tension between the super optimistic view and then
Right.
this fear of it all going wrong.
Yeah, totally.
And that's kind of what we want to unpack.
Yeah. And what I thought was really interesting
Okay.
is that one of the pieces you shared actually pushes back on that.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, hold on, it's not that simple. It's not like hybrid is inherently good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about how it's done, right?
Okay,
Like,
yeah.
how intentional are you being? How adaptable are you as an organization?
Got it.
And like, the biggest thing is leadership.
Oh, okay.
It's about how leadership approaches it.
That makes sense.
It's like, yeah, you need bold leadership to make this work.
That really resonates.
Yep.
Because it's not just about having a policy, right?
No.
One of the articles actually had this great analogy comparing hybrid work to like a high performance engine.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
It might look sleek and shiny,
Uh-huh.
but if it's not engineered properly, carefully designed,
Yeah.
it's not going to work the way it's supposed to.
Absolutely.
So you need that level of thoughtfulness. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got the obvious benefits, right?
Uh-huh.
The flexibility we talked about.
Yep.
Being able to get talent from anywhere,
Mhm.
saving money on all that office space.
Of course, those are attractive.
Like, those are all great.
For sure.
But it's only one side of the coin, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about that other side.
Okay.
The potential nightmare scenario.
Right.
What are, like, the big things that can go wrong?
Well, there are a few things that your sources pointed to,
Okay.
but this idea of proximity bias.
Proximity bias.
Proximity bias, yeah.
Okay, I'm not
Seems to be a major.
totally unfamiliar with that.
Yeah.
So break that down for me.
Okay, so essentially,
Like, what is it?
it's this tendency we all have
Mm-hmm.
to favor people we see more often,
Okay.
like in person.
Got it.
It's just human nature,
Like, unconscious, right?
totally unconscious.
Okay.
It's how we build relationships and,
Yeah.
make judgments about people.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm getting this.
Yeah.
So even if someone working remotely is doing amazing work,
Right.
the person who's in the office more
hmm
might get more recognition,
Yeah,
more opportunities just because they're there.
exactly.
Oh, wow.
And one of your sources had some really concrete examples.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like think about who ends up getting mentored informally,
Right.
who gets pulled into those quick meetings where decisions are made, who gets picked for the high-profile projects,
Yeah.
or even just like who comes to mind first when a manager is thinking about promotions.
So the people who are around more,
Exactly.
it just seems like that could lead to so much resentment,
It can. Yeah.
and it's totally unfair.
Yeah, your sources talk about remote employees feeling overlooked
Right.
and undervalued,
Mm-hmm.
which leads to, them being less engaged.
Of course.
But even worse, it can really disadvantage remote employees
Okay.
when it comes to their careers.
Oh, wow.
And, all that talk about DEI.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Yeah.
right?
Well, this directly undermines that. One study actually showed that people who spent more time in the office
Okay.
got promoted faster,
Really?
even when you account for how well they were actually performing.
Wow. So it's like a built-in advantage, and
Yep.
that totally defeats the whole purpose
Yeah.
of offering flexibility with hybrid.
Exactly.
It creates the system that's biased
Right.
without even realizing it.
Yeah, and it's not just about individuals.
Really?
Your sources also talked about the impact on the company's culture overall.
Oh, or...
Like, how do you build a shared culture
Yeah.
when people aren't together as much?
Right. That's that whole water cooler thing.
Got
How do
that.
you create that when people aren't always there?
One article called it the organic osmosis of culture.
Okay.
Like all those little interactions,
Yeah.
the quick chats, problem solving in the hallway,
Mm-hmm.
grabbing coffee together.
Yeah, those little moments.
Those are actually super important
Right.
for building those connections.
They are.
And in a hybrid setup, that stuff happens way less.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to replicate.
And I imagine onboarding new people
Oh, yeah.
is way harder too, right?
Definitely.
Because they're not immersed in that environment.
Right.
They don't pick up on those unspoken things.
Yeah, your sources highlight the risk of what they call cultural fragmentation.
Okay.
You know, where you get these silos
Oh.
between people who are in the office a lot
Right.
and those who are mostly remote.
Yeah.
And that weakens the whole sense of belonging, that feeling of shared purpose.
And that's so important, right?
It's important.
Like for the company to feel cohesive.
Exactly.
So it's not just about being fair to individuals.
Right.
It's about the very fabric of the company.
Yeah.
That's a huge point.
It is.
And then you have the practical stuff, like just getting work done when your team's all over the place.
Yeah, communication and collaboration become a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
You know, your sources talked about this increased reliance on asynchronous communication,
Right.
which has its perks.
It's flexible.
Right, but it can also cause delays and misunderstandings.
Yeah, totally.
And then there's the whole virtual meeting fatigue thing.
Oh, tell me about it.
We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Zoom overload.
Yeah, for sure.
But beyond just too many meetings,
Yeah.
what are the real communication hurdles?
Right.
Well, your sources emphasize this idea of information parity,
Okay.
which basically means that everyone, no matter where they are, has access to the same info
Got it.
at the same time.
Okay.
You don't want crucial stuff being shared informally in the office
Right.
and remote folks missing out.
That makes total sense.
Right.
Yeah, like you don't want to be out of the loop
Uh-huh.
just because you're not physically there.
Exactly.
Some random conversation.
And to achieve that information equity,
Yeah.
your sources say you need really good systems
Okay.
and clear communication protocols.
Got it.
You can't just hope it'll all work out.
Right.
You have to actively make sure the info flows to everyone.
Okay, so we've got all these challenges, the proximity bias, cultural divides, communication issues. It sounds like that productivity nightmare is a real possibility.
It is if you don't address these things.
Right.
But the good news is
Right.
your sources also talk about what they call a leadership mandate
Okay.
to navigate all this effectively.
So it's not just about pointing out the problems.
No.
It's about finding solutions.
Exactly.
And leadership is key.
It's crucial.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Well, they break it down into a few key areas.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the first one is embracing outcome-oriented leadership.
Embrace outcome-oriented leadership.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Well, it's a pretty big shift from managing based on, being present.
Right, like butts and seats.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
To managing based on results.
gotcha.
Like, what are people actually accomplishing?
Makes sense.
So your sources really emphasize trust here
Okay,
and giving people autonomy.
got it.
Leaders need to be super clear about expectations
Mm-hmm.
and define success based on impact,
Okay.
not hours worked or where the work happened.
So the focus is on the what,
Yes.
not the where.
Exactly.
But that probably requires a mindset shift for some managers
Yeah.
who are used to, the old way of doing things.
Yeah.
But it also means having regular check-ins that are focused on progress.
Yeah, like how are things going?
What are the challenges?
Are there roadblocks? How can I support you? Right.
Exactly. Not just
Checking attendance.
Yeah, not just are you online?
No.
And performance reviews need to be equitable too, right?
Absolutely. That's crucial.
You can't have a system that favors people who are in the office more.
No, not at all.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, so the next one is champion radical equity.
Champion radical equity.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's about actively combating bias.
Okay.
Your sources say it's not enough to just acknowledge that bias exists.
Right.
Leaders have to actually design systems and processes to prevent that bias from affecting things.
Okay, so give me an example.
Sure. So think about things like project assignments,
Right.
performance reviews, promotions.
Yeah.
You need clear, standardized procedures for all that
Okay.
to minimize the chances of unconscious bias creeping in.
So it's about making it as objective as possible.
Yeah, as much as you can.
Yeah.
It's also about creating opportunities for remote team members to shine,
Okay.
to really showcase their work and their contributions.
I like that.
And another really practical point from your sources is about hybrid meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Making sure they're run in a way that includes everyone.
Yeah.
So that remote participants aren't just passive observers.
Right. They need to be active participants.
Exactly. And that might even mean investing in better tech.
Okay.
And really thinking about how to run a meeting.
Yeah.
As if everyone is remote.
Even if most people are in the office.
Yeah, that's the remote-first mindset.
That's really interesting.
It prioritizes inclusivity.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay, the next one is redefine the office as a destination.
Okay, redefine the office as a destination.
So the idea here is that the office needs a new purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're asking people to come in,
right,
it needs to offer something they can't get at home.
Yeah, totally.
So your sources suggest thinking of it as a hub for collaboration, connection, innovation, building culture through shared experiences.
Yeah.
So less about individual workspaces and more about spaces for teams to work together.
Okay.
Like project rooms and places for people to socialize.
So it's a more deliberate use of the space.
Yeah, it's about being intentional.
Makes sense.
And office attendance shouldn't be the default.
Okay.
It should be tied to specific goals.
Like it.
Like a project kickoff.
Right.
Strategic planning sessions.
Yeah.
Team building activities.
So you go in with a purpose.
Exactly.
I like that.
Okay, the next one, invest in seamless infrastructure.
Invest in seamless infrastructure.
Which covers both tech and training.
Okay, the tools and the know-how. So break that down for me.
All right, so for hybrid to work, the tech has to be reliable.
Yeah, for sure.
For everyone.
Makes sense.
So we're talking good internet, solid collaboration platforms, secure remote access, and some of your sources even mentioned providing stipends.
Oh, wow.
To help remote employees set up proper home offices.
That's great.
Yeah, because you don't want people struggling with bad equipment.
Right, or spotty internet.
Or feeling like they have a second-rate setup.
Yeah, it needs to be equitable.
Exactly. But just as important as the tech is the training.
Gotcha.
Managers need training on leading remote teams, on facilitating virtual collaboration, and on recognizing and mitigating their own biases. And employees need training too.
Okay, like what?
Best practices for remote work. How to use the collaboration tools effectively. How to set boundaries between work and life.
So it's about giving people the skills to thrive in this new environment.
Yeah, you can't just throw tech at people and expect it to work.
That makes so much sense.
All right, the next imperative is foster intentional connection and culture.
Foster intentional connection and culture.
Yeah, we talked about this a bit earlier.
Right, like building that sense of community when people aren't always together.
So your sources emphasize being proactive, creating opportunities for connection that don't rely on being in the same room.
Right.
So things like structured team meetings, where you build in time for informal interaction.
Got it.
Virtual social events.
Yeah.
And using in-office days strategically
right.
for those team-building activities we talked about.
So it's about being deliberate.
Yeah, being intentional about fostering relationships.
Makes sense.
Okay, last one.
Okay, hit me.
Communicate relentlessly and transparently.
Communicate relentlessly and transparently. That sounds...
It sounds simple,
that's super...
but it's super important.
Why is that?
Because ambiguity is the enemy of successful hybrid work.
Gotcha.
So any policies related to hybrid need to be crystal clear, applied consistently,
right,
and everyone needs to be able to easily find them.
So no hidden rules.
No hidden rules.
Okay.
You also need to be super clear about expectations.
Like what?
Like communication channels, response times,
right,
even things like availability.
Yeah, what are people expected to be working? And leaders need to set the example right.
Absolutely.
By being transparent themselves.
Yeah, making sure everyone has the information they need.
No matter where they're working.
Exactly.
So you don't have one set of rules for office folks.
Right.
And a different set for remote folks.
No, everyone's on the same page.
That makes so much sense.
And it builds trust.
Okay, we've covered a lot here.
We have.
But I feel like we're missing something.
What's that?
Like, what happens when things don't work?
Oh, right.
Or if things change.
Okay, yeah, so that's where the final imperative comes in.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's embrace, iteration, and feedback.
Embrace, iteration, and feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that all about?
So your sources acknowledge that hybrid work is still evolving.
Yeah, it's relatively new.
It is.
So we're all still figuring it out.
Exactly.
What works for one company might not work for another.
And even what works today might not work a year from now.
So you need to be able to adapt.
You have to.
Yeah.
So leaders need to create systems for getting regular feedback from both employees and managers.
Got it.
Like, how's the hybrid model working for you? What's going well?
Yeah.
What could be better?
What are the pain points?
Exactly.
And you need to look at the data too, right?
Well, yeah. Things like productivity metrics,
Okay.
engagement surveys, retention rates.
That tells you a lot.
It does.
And then you use all that to make adjustments.
Yeah, you have to be willing to experiment, to learn from what works and what doesn't.
And not be afraid to change things up.
Exactly. Being rigid is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I can see that.
You need to be flexible and agile.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges. We've talked about solutions.
We have.
But your sources also go a step further.
They do.
And talk about this idea of looking beyond the binary.
Right.
Of just in-office versus remote.
Yeah.
And they see hybrid work as
a strategic opportunity. So it's not just about mitigating risk. No, it's about seeing the potential upside.
Okay, I like that.
So your sources talk about things like being able to access a much wider talent pool.
Right.
Increasing engagement and retention.
By offering the flexibility people want?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fostering greater inclusivity because you can accommodate different needs.
And even driving innovation.
Yes.
Because you have all these diverse perspectives. Right. So it's about reframing the whole conversation from focusing on problems to focusing on the possibilities.
Absolutely.
And one source made a really important point is that for a lot of companies, the question of whether to go hybrid is already answered.
It's a given at this point.
Yeah, it's not really a choice anymore.
Right. The choice is how to do it right.
Okay.
And that takes work.
Like what kind of work?
It's about redesigning processes, recalibrating your culture, and developing the right leadership capabilities.
Yeah. Like we talked about. So it's more than just logistics.
It's about rethinking how work gets done.
Fundamentally.
Yes, at a fundamental level.
And your sources really emphasize that this is a journey. It's not a destination.
It's ongoing.
Yeah.
And it takes courage to challenge those old assumptions about work.
Got it.
It takes empathy
to
understand the diverse needs of your people. And it takes intentionality.
Like being deliberate about every decision.
Every single step of the way.
Okay, so the takeaway here is that companies that really commit to this, that put in the effort, they're the ones that can create work environments that are truly equitable, productive, and human-centric.
That's
and they can go way beyond just thinking of hybrid as some kind of compromise.
Or just blending two models together.
Right.
It's about creating something new.
Yeah, something better.
Something better, yeah.
So it's not a guaranteed success?
No, it's not.
But it's a huge opportunity for companies that do it right.
For sure.
So to wrap up our deep dive into all this hybrid work stuff, the big takeaway is that success isn't automatic.
No.
It takes a lot of thought and planning
and flexibility
and a real focus on making things fair for everyone.
For everyone, yeah.
And building those connections between people.
Absolutely.
And leaders need to step up and embrace this new way of managing.
Yeah, a more outcome-oriented approach that's adaptable to change.
Exactly.
So hopefully this has given you a better understanding of how complex hybrid work really is.
It's definitely more than meets the eye.
It is.
So as you go back to your own work and think about all this, the proximity bias, the need for connection, this new kind of leadership.
That's a lot to consider.
What stands out to you the most?
Yeah, what resonates?
What are the big challenges? Or the exciting opportunities you see?
In your own context.
Yeah. Think about that.
It's worth reflecting on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot to unpack here.
For sure.
But hopefully this gives you a good starting point.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for diving in with us.
You got it.